I want to talk crypto. Joining us right now, Anthony Pompliano, founder and CEO of Professional Capital Management. Good morning to you. What do you make of what's happening here with Bitcoin? I know you're going to say, well, you know, it's a little bit of a reversal, but maybe just a little bit.
Well, I think that Bitcoin is a very volatile asset, and what we know is in bull markets, usually there are these drawbacks, but the drawbacks historically have been 30% drawdowns, and these haven't been 30%. These have been more like 10, 15% drawdowns. And so what I think we're watching is a market that's maturing, institutions are coming in, it's getting bigger, and so what you're starting to see is kind of muted volatility, and that means that people who are hoping Bitcoin's going to go to $400,000 or $500,000 in a bull market, this cycle is probably not going to happen, but also people who think that you're going to get, you know, kind of 85, 90% drawdowns in the bear markets. That's probably not going to happen either.
Okay, so if neither of those things are happening, maybe it looks a little bit more like what you've always said, gold.
Well, I think that Bitcoin has gone from a contrarian trade to consensus trade. In order to do that, you need it to become less volatile. Because for institutions, what they want is they want something that is more volatile than the assets they hold, but they can't have something that is going up, you know, hundreds of percent and down 90%. And they have to constantly report kind of a mark to market. And so what I think you're watching here is just the maturation of this asset. And then what I also think is pretty interesting is the holder base is rotating. And so you went from kind of a pure retail audience that, you know, frankly is subject to fear and greed to now you have a lot of institutions that in public companies, they're not going to sell. You have the ETFs, they're likely going to act very differently. And so I think that this is all kind of natural and a good sign for Bitcoin in the long run. What
do you think the floor is from where we are right now? And what do you think the upside is, given that, as you said, a lot of folks who come on our broadcast, Kathy Wood and others, who would tell you that, you know, she thinks this is supposed to get to $500,000 or $1 million a coin.
Zero and infinity.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I think that Bitcoin will definitely go to $1 million at some point in the future. I just think this cycle, right, it's very unlikely that it's going to go to $1 million. And so what is the floor? I don't know, right? What I do know is right now at $112,000, $113,000, it's pretty oversold. And so I would expect that you have two things lining up. You've got kind of the overselling of Bitcoin, and you're headed into kind of September, October, which is usually a pretty good time, especially if it is the year after a halving. But also, if you look at like the VIX seasonality chart, usually right about now, you'll start to see the VIX really start to kind of move upwards, and we get a lot more volatility. And so I just think that it's August. People are on vacation. They're tired. They're, you know, not paying attention, and things kind of just draw down. And starting in September, we should see Bitcoin kind of come back alive again.
Because of what, though?
Well, I think there is kind of a simple thing of just like people in front of their screens in September. They're not in front of their screen in August. And so people are buying and being more active. But also, I think that you've got a lot of speculation on a Fed interest rate cut. I think you've got a lot of the people who raised capital for these Bitcoin treasury companies that are going to start buying in kind of late August, early September. And then I also think that if people believe that the end of Q3 and the beginning of Q4 is a good time for Bitcoin, people start to act in a way that makes that.
But the folks that are selling, you think are selling for what reason? And the reason I'm asking that is I've heard from a bunch of people who have actually sold some Bitcoin, moved it into Ethereum. That actually has been one trade for some folks. There's another trade among sort of folks who are interested in blockchain, but not necessarily Bitcoin per se, who've actually bought into Circle, for example, publicly traded company that sells stablecoin, you know, that it's a stablecoin business. Do you see people moving from one place to the other?
Well, some people are definitely doing it. I don't know if I would suggest people do that. You know, the whole blockchain, not Bitcoin, is kind of like a 2016, 2017 viewpoint. I think that that's been pretty much disproven that Bitcoin is the king. It's been the king. It's going to remain the king. But on top of that, I do think that there's a lot more opportunities for people to play this. And what you are getting is you're getting capital markets where people are optimizing for different things. Some people want yield. Some people want infrastructure. Some people want the actual underlying asset, Bitcoin itself. And so I think that you're going to get fracturing of capital, which again leads to that muted volatility.
In terms of ETFs, what kind of volume are you seeing going there versus what's at people buying the underlying asset?
I think that
how much does that matter?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of people who they can't buy Bitcoin, so they're going to go buy the ETFs. Now, one thing that I do think is pretty interesting is I have seen a number of people in the Bitcoin community who, you know, are purported to have large holdings who have said, hey, look, actually, I'm going to convert the Bitcoin into the ETF because from a security perspective, it's something that somebody can't necessarily hack or take from me. I don't think that's going to be the norm. I think that you're still going to see the Bitcoin community talk a lot about kind of not your keys, not your coins, and make sure you have custody of the asset. But there are people who are doing stuff like that.